Hey everyone, welcome back to the Investor's Guide to Joy. So I have Wyatt Simon here who's going to talk a little bit about, the book that he has coming out, as well as just his perspective of how he's built his portfolio, the trials really through that, as well as the, celebrations and joys, what financial independence looks like, feels like, maybe even sounds like. I don't know if there's a sound to it. We'll talk through that, but excited to have you on and, hear your perspective and really your story as well. So
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Paul. I'm excited to be here.
yeah. So this idea of, financial independence, I was curious to understand what do you define as it? One thing that I've found as I've gone through this financial, freedom, financial independence, sort of journey, or even financial flexibility is just this concept of, hey, for example, maybe my current expenses are $5,000 a month, right? But then there's this idea of breaking things down sort of like Dave Ramsey style to have the, minimum amount of expenses. And it's like, oh, I'm financially independent, but I'm bored out of my mind. I can't do anything, can't even get, chips and guac at the nice restaurant. Right. And so it's just to say what would you define it as? And then what has that process been like and involved over time as you've been, financially independent? Is it then oh, hey, it's now 30K months and, we're driving a different car every week? Say that kind of tongue in cheek, but wanted to hear, your perspective.
Yeah, so financially independent. First off, I'll say I thought at 27 I became financially independent, where I thought I could just, travel and live on the beach and do whatever I wanted. And it turns out taxes go up and insurance goes up and inflation causes rent to go up. But if operating costs go up too, your cash flow kind of gets chewed up. And so financial independence can change depending on how much income that you have coming in and how much income you have going out, right? And so to answer your question, yeah, I mean, I lived in a duplex, still live in a duplex, finally moving into the new dream house, right? And then, we've got some other family events that are happening. So expenses are going to go up again. But I would just define financial independence as you have the ability to choose what you want to do with your time. And then, yeah, however you want to do that to create income to come in.
Would you maybe, I'll use the word recommend this idea of seasonal financial independence or this idea of taking a sabbatical type thing? I've had seasons in my life where kind of done that, run a business. Hey, things didn't pan out, as much, go back to corporate, back and forth. Some people also use it as a leap year or other things like that, post kind of college or something. What maybe, viewpoint do you have on that? Do you have experience, with that? It kind of seemed like you did in some aspects, not intentionally, but it's just kind of oh, hey, this is great, but now we got to, continue moving the ball down the field to the things that really produce, the income margin to, increase expenses, things like that.
Yeah. So I'll just share with you my story. Open book, transparent here. So I started buying real estate back in 2022, worked a corporate job, got very good at my job, and was buying real estate using the BRRRR strategy. So okay. I've done over 54 BRRRRs in my life. I still own 54 houses. And then I own multifamily, office, and basically of the $20 million portfolio, I own about 40% of. The rest of it, I've got a vertically integrated rental portfolio. So I've got 5 full-time employees that do the property management in-house. So that was my first really business on my own. And then I've also got an acquisition company. So we buy and acquire off-market properties. We used to hold them and now we mostly wholesale them as a business. And then we also do hard money financing for investors. And I hold my agent license and do mostly referrals through that. But that's kind of the blueprint of where I'm at. And so at 25, I became a millionaire. At 27, I became a multimillionaire. And that was when I left my W-2 job. And that sounds cool. And I thought I was financially independent at that time, but it turns out I was not. And so fast forward at 28, I almost went and got another W-2 job because I was like, man, I've got these assets, I've got this equity, but if it's not creating enough cash to live on, I was watching my equity go up and my cash go down. And I was like, oh my gosh, something's got to change. Right. And so when you say seasonal financial freedom, it's okay, yep. And so that was where the beginning of this year was a big pivot to be okay, what can I do to then create more cash while these equities get paid down over time and cash flow goes back as we're renovating and improving properties? And so that was where I then became, we restarted our wholesaling company that we had. So an off-market acquisitions company. And then to answer your question, as far as seasonal independence, it's for property management, now that's a business that's just kicking off income for me that I'm not involved in anymore.
Yeah.
Right. But for the last 3 years, it was oh my goodness, setting up systems, hiring people, getting the right people in place. And so, until I really get all these balls hired out, I wouldn't call myself financially independent anymore because I'm still working in the businesses or in some of the businesses that I'm growing. And
Mhm.
so once they get to a point where they're growing without you, that is when I would then call you financially independent again.
Sure. Yeah. It's like you're less and less like dependent or they're dependent on you type thing. But that full independence, yeah, is that different sort of piece. I mean, is that a goal to be completely, independent of it and you're, not doing anything more than like thinking about it and just, trading emails or, hopping on a call or two to just check in with others, almost like board of advisor type of experience than necessarily like, CEO or manager or individual contributor?
Definitely. Yeah. That's the direction that we're headed and working towards, right? Really, if I can we're getting enough cash reserve built up in our businesses so that I can then hire out the acquisitions and dispo piece. At that point, then I step back into doing what I love to do, which is consulting and coaching, right? So
Cool.
I do help people build portfolios. It's what I'm super passionate about, and that's like that doesn't seem like work to me, right? Like that's what I love. And so that is really where we're headed. But in the meantime, I'm in the day in the trenches doing the things too.
Cool. What did define like what is helping people build, portfolios? Because some could think that's like a portfolio of three. Others could think that's a portfolio of, 300, whether that be single family home, Airbnb, which is still a component of single family home, plexes, multifamily, other, commercial types. Does it depend maybe?
Yeah. So there's different ways to do it, right? Some people take the approach of syndicating, right? So they're just helping passive people invest and build portfolios passively. I help the active person. I've been an operator all of my life. And so what I do is I find deeply discounted deals that are usually mismanaged. And then we come in and we stabilize them. And I've got the vertically integrated piece to do that with. And so I've helped people go from 0 to 1. That's not my preference. Now I help people really go from 2 to like 12 or 9 to 30. And so like one of my first ever student, his name is Alejandro. He came to the program. He had 3 properties in 12 weeks. He had 12 units. He acquired, it was 4 more properties that were duplexes, and he did it seller financed. And so he didn't really know how to negotiate it to be seller financed. By the way, he's 23 years old, like absolute stud.
Yeah.
But we were able to give him some unlocks to then negotiate with the leads that he already had.
Cool. So I would say a lot of people just in general got, into the real estate game, call it, 2019 to 2021 for a lot of different like fashions, right? And those that did have, ridden a pretty beautiful wave. That includes myself. I'd expanded to just a condo to then 3 single family homes with additional, land in the span of like 18 months. And, if Austin would have kept its great trajectory, net worth be a little higher than it is, right? But right now I'm watching some of those, go down by almost a fourth. But it's just to say like unlocking what, like is that in terms of equity, is that concept of seller financing, even doing like a seller carry back finance note, I think is like all the terms practically tactically, like what is that like? And then I want to dive into a deeper part of this.
Right. So I guess I'll just say this, there's really 3 steps, right? The first step, what I help my students do is we get extreme clarity with a buy right criteria. And that strategy, to answer your question, is different for every person,
Sure.
right? Because the 23-year-old might be wanting to, but the 23-year-old is going to want to be building equity, right? The 60-year-old is probably wanting to build cash flow, right? And so it's a much different strategy for each student. And so we have to get clarity on the strategy so that they can then create their buy right criteria, be able to take action immediately. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is we get them financing lined up and the right financing for the strategy, which again is tailored to that strategy. If it's seller financing for a 23-year-old, that's different than the 60-year-old that's going to be putting 50% down because they want cash flow. And then the last one is deal flow. And so this is where a lot of investors come to me for, okay, how do I create deal flow? Well, it's like, well, we got to get the other 2 set up first, because if you get a bunch of people sending you deals and you don't know what you want to buy, then you're just going to be a chicken with your head cut off. And we want to be really like rifled approach on when a deal comes through the desk, boom, I take action on it today, right? When that deal comes.
Yeah, you bet. So it makes me think of something interesting that came up. So Jamie Gruber, who is within the Go Abundance community, was a syndicate. I think he still kind of is, but anyways, syndicator for multifamily properties, right? And he talks about this concept of how now he's doing brand social media type of influencing experience, meaning to say that he recognized like what problems do I like want to have, right? And not speaking for him, but just this concept around hey, I'm doing the multifamily syndication to build the equity and build, some kind of cash flow piece in that 3 to 5 year timeline that typically syndications have for their, sale event. yet, that may not be something I actually truly want. And so I've had a fascinating thought on like, are you just doing it for example, the cash flow, but like tenants and toilets like drive you up a flipping wall and you can't handle people like at all. Like not even like, oh, I can like finally kind of talk to someone, but you just like can't. So to what extent have you found that people are like uncovering within themselves like what they truly want? One, in terms of like outcome, and then two, almost in terms of like a tolerance sort of thing, is where I'll stop kind of asking that question.
Yeah. So again, with each student, it's different, and we tailor their strategy to what they have. And I'll give an example of this, and then I'll tell you my personal journey of
Cool.
that exactly. So one of my students, his name's Kyle, awesome dude, lives out in California, makes buku bucks in his W-2 job. And then he's also crushing it in this side business that's, starting to generate 15,000 a month in passive cash flow from the side business as an agency owner. And so anyways, and then he came to me to start investing in real estate. It's like, dude, you don't need to be calling brokers to try to find deals. Like your time is best spent crushing it in your job and your side business, and focus energy on that. But what you do need to get is you need to get someone, the who, that's bringing you deals that you can either partner with them and just find that operator to just, ramp your stuff, because you need it for tax benefits. You don't need it for the cash flow and all the other things. And so it really depends on the strategy of the person in that scenario. And that way he doesn't become overwhelmed, because taking it back to lifestyle, right? He just doesn't have the capacity to do everything. And why should he be calling owners direct and trying to negotiate deals direct, right? When he's already doing very well in his like, he should be doubling down on what he's great at and not trying to like change his lifestyle and cater to these lower task things that he's doing. So that's first and foremost. And then secondly, like for me personally, just being really vulnerable, I got caught up in the achiever mindset, where it was just like, man, like every year I'd set my goals, and then I just like, I got to go achieve these goals. And my goals just became like gross units and gross volume of real estate owned. And so then I started like, trying to buy more and more and more and more real estate. And there just became more and more operations with it. And I don't know if you ever read The E-Myth by Michael Gerber.
Read bits and pieces, but tell me what
Yeah.
comes to mind.
So he explains there's really three types of people in a business. There's the technician that's really good at doing the work. There's the manager that manages the technicians, and then there's the entrepreneur that really sets up the whole thing. And you can do all of them, but you really can only do one well. And there's really usually what you enjoy. So for me, I started a property. I was a great technician when it came to my job in sales. And dude, I was an awful manager, right? Like I did not know how to manage people. I was in my 20s when I started a management company, and then I started hiring people and trying to put them into a system. I didn't really know how to do systems. I just knew how to be a technician. Sure. And so the management company and these operations with tenants and toilets and all that stuff was awful until I was able to hire a consultant to then help me get the right people and the systems in place, because they were an awesome manager. And then eventually I hired that manager within the company. So now everyone reports to my director, and then my director reports to me. So I can now be the entrepreneur. I'm not the technician in any of that business, but this is like, I passed out 4 times from stress, dude. Like, so I'm telling you this and wrapping up a lot of my years in life in this little story, but it's real. And so to answer your question, yeah, people need to change from like, there comes a certain point where wealth doesn't mean that much anymore. It's more lifestyle.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I mean, I definitely resonate with that. Had the same experience with my short-term rentals, and then, business endeavor, raising funds for oil and gas, as well as, W-2, at least, when I had it. But yeah, I was elevating and delegating, when I could. And then you probably experienced this too, as kind of the entrepreneur that, then hired the manager, or, even kind of technician sort of piece, where the people are able to do like a work, and meaning that also sometimes people do their best, but their best may not be at that A level. I switched one property manager in a short-term rental sense, and ended up being kind of like a fractional sort of piece versus percentage. And so instead of 25%, it was $250 a month. And we increased gross rev for the year by a third. And it was just like a player, like, heck yeah. So that sort of fascinating piece. And also to your point, to kind of echo probably what you've experienced too, is that, yeah, sure, it could this be more optimized? Like, yes. Also, like, what are you optimizing for? great, you made $2,000 more, in that, short-term rental, or maybe long-term rental for the year, but like at what cost? And so for myself, I've really recognized that real estate in a lot of ways has those ceilings in terms of cash flow. Sure, if you want to go maybe example, rent by room strategy, convert a couple rooms, right? Bam, there's, some cash flow because that's something I'm in the process of doing for one of my long-term rentals. But beyond that, like it's kind of optimized in some way. And so then it's to say, like, what does that leverageability look like, right? So, second, home loan, or, just like creative financing, seller financing, like that kind of stuff. Like that's where, that additional income could come in. But yeah, optimizing to make like a couple thousand more dollars and build a, website for the short-term rental, or like all this stuff is like all this work for like a couple more grand. It's like, if I spent that much amount of time on something else, it could transcend into more. Or even if it doesn't turn into more, by golly, what could I do with, 10 hours a week over the course of a year just to make this, website sort of stuff, but then also have more, hassles with, a number of different things. And so, yeah, it's kind of cool to see how you've taken that as well in kind of a different sort of light. So
thanks, man. Yeah, I think the foundational shift for myself, and it's so hard because I wasn't raised like this, and I don't think a lot of people are, is okay, is that worth my time? And that's easy to say, but like how many people actually know their hourly rate, right? And so if you're listening to this, do you actually know your hourly rate? Like what are you worth an hour? And like you shouldn't be doing any task that's less than that. So like people that come to me that like want to invest in real estate, like some of these guys, if you're not worth a lot per hour, then it's like, okay, you just need to double down on what you're good at, or you need to learn real estate to then, start your hourly rate there. But a lot of these guys are like wealthy sales guys, right? They're making 200,000 a year. And it's like, dude, how about you just go crush your sales job and then you hire out these tasks to do? And like, dude, I built a website for my freaking property management company, and it was awful. Like it was my first website and it took me like 3 weeks.
Sorry. Yeah. I have a virtual assistant right now who's been absolutely killing it, is an absolute godsend, has been working on it for 2 weeks. And it's just like 30 minutes a day of like, what do you need? How's it going? Like, this is sick. Oh, you can do that and like link it to affiliate Amazon. And you just like,
yeah,
cool, man. Yeah. SEO, like just, yeah.
So the website, like you'll see it in the show notes, like my website, literally I worked on it for three weeks and it was off. It was like a C at best. And then my VA is just like, hey, would you like help with this? I'm like, sure. And dude, I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, so anyways, yeah, hire out all of the tasks, figure out what you are worth an hour, and then start playing the capital game, which is like, don't do anything less than that and just double down on that. And then double down on that for 8 hours a day or 6 hours a day and enjoy the rest. Like take it off. Like it's okay.
You brought up an interesting thought I had in my mind. It's this idea of worth. So oftentimes we think of worth as like, dollar amount, right? We also think of worth as like, personal sort of piece, right? I've recognized there have been seasons in my life and my former self. And I tell the story of like, I wouldn't spend, $50 for a life coach to help me get that 20% or 10% increase in that salary, job. But man, now it's like mastermind events or mastermind like courses, like, oh, it's, 10 grand or 4 grand for the weekend. It's like, yes, but the type of people and the things, as well as the fact that like, I'm never going to unlearn this information, just wildly different perspective. So I wanted to go through 3 things that came to mind, and maybe there's 7, maybe there's 5, kind of piece, but it's just the idea of like, in the sense of worth, what are you making, right? So think like cash flow, right? Hey, that's pretty easy to like calculate. I also had this thought of like net worth type of decisions, right? What would your 8-figure, 7-figure, maybe even like 6-figure self do, depending where you are on the scale, right? And then another is to say like, what do you believe you're worth, right? And so that is again kind of that other piece where it's like, no, I don't touch this, even though I can't like afford this and it's beyond like my reach. And I found, for myself that that's been a, fascinating journey of like, hey, there's not enough cash flow to support things. And sure, there's, the equity in, the properties, which I'm trying to tap, and I won't go into that story, but it's just to say that there's those sort of like aspects. So I was curious if maybe there was another almost like worth frame of mindset that you could maybe think of. And I want to spend a couple minutes just kind of going through each to kind of give perspective to each of them.
Yeah. So for me, I'm a Christian, right? So I do believe in God, and I believe that we're all, I'll put it this way. As a capitalist, we all have in a value to society in the capital sense, where it's like you are worth X dollars because of your skill set. That's why you get paid a wage, right? Now, switching it from that frame to the Christian frame, where I come from, is like, hey, we're all brothers and sisters in Christ. And so we're all created as sinners and we're all equal in that sense. And so is no man is greater than any other man because we're all sinners. And so
Mhm.
therefore, like we're all on the even playing field when it comes to just like person to person. And
Yeah.
so yeah, that's how I look at it.
No, it's awesome additional ad. It reminds me of a group still involved in, but they have basically like course packs. It's called Faith Driven Investor. I'd recommend, for yourself as well as others who are of faith or even just faith curious to explore it either on the non-accredited side, the accredited side, or they have an even faith driven entrepreneurs. And one of the biggest takeaways that I had from that, well, 6 week course pack, or there's also a 4 week real estate one as well, is this idea of are you as excited and enthused and just confirmed in the belief that your name is written in heaven as you are with that big property sale or that cash flow or things like that, right? And in some ways I've found, like, even as man of faith myself, like sometimes those things are conflicting or they're not even on the same board, where it's like, yeah, my name's written in heaven, like, sick, cool, man, but like, have you heard of 50 grand months? Like, could you imagine? Oh, but my heart posture is in a really great place and I can tithe to the church and I can give to these people and do this and bring my friends along and all this stuff. But yeah, like, sure, cool, cool, cool. And it's a fascinating, like, eye-opening piece of, what truly matters and, why, it does. And in some ways, to me, at least, it brings back this idea of worth, where again, it's not a cash flow piece. It's not a, net worth piece. It's not even what you believe you are worth piece. There's this interesting, like, concept of like women are queens and men are like kings in terms of like chess, right? These guys are talking about, like, in Miami, how, women can just kind of go from yacht to yacht, right? But you see the man just like trudge away to finally be able to like afford the yacht, right? And he gets to move one place, but women can just like bounce around. And so that piece of like, you could just, oh no, I'm worth this. I don't do that. I don't get that, right? And there's good for boundaries and standards, right? But there's that other piece where oftentimes I've at least found, like, as a male, and that kind of story resonated with me, like we have to like prove our worth or have our worth, not necessarily just be like, oh, I'm that like billionaire type person. And it's like, well, fantastic. Like, you can't get a reservation here. And it's like, no, but like, I'm me. And they're like, you can leave, as just a random, sort of example. And so it was a really cool thought or really just a different perspective, right? Of like, what is our worth from, again, like a fourth kind of sentiment that you mentioned. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Thanks for sharing what you shared. I like the chess story. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me think of yachts or just boats in some ways differently.
Yeah.
What that brought me also to an interesting thought around this idea of like, what is living your ideal day, right? And so, I can share mine in the sense of it's, having a morning routine, and that changes in different fashions, right? I've done Project 50, I've done 75 Hard, I've done the Live Hard program, even Miracle Morning as well, type of thing. Some sort of morning routine, then do 2 to 4 hours of focused work, ideally phones off in another room, and then it's meeting at least one new person a day, doing some sort of, workout exercise sort of piece, and then having that night to really connect with people, maybe even just stare at a wall, connect with myself, that sort of like piece, right? Maybe there's some travel in there type aspect. What have you found like your ideal day to be? How did you find it? Like, or I guess more was it a create or find? I'll just see like what kind of comes up to you.
Yeah. So for me, my perfect day is I'm a huge Miracle Morning advocate. So
Okay. There you
I
go.
love Miracle Mornings. For me, it's mostly waking up early, reading before the gym. That's been a change lately, is actually getting the reading in before the gym and then doing the gym, coming back and then, refocusing my goals. So I guess the scribing or the writing part, it's, hey, being really intentional on, okay, here's my goals for the week. So what are my goals for today? And I do my top 6 tasks and I do, okay, how long is that going to take me about? So I can gauge. A good rule of thumb is you don't want more than about 6 hours on that, or it's not going to happen with everything else that's happening. So that's the Miracle Morning to start off the day. The next part for me is I've learned that I am a people person. So I was an operator that was doing property management, portfolio, asset management. And I was just like, dude, I'm cooped up drinking coffee at an office, 8 hours a day, and I hate it. And I used to be in sales, right? And so that was when I would meet with 2 people a day, and it was awesome. I loved it. I was out and about, driving to people's houses and figuring things out. So for me, it's podcasts is what I love. I got to have some kind of social interaction. And I, like you said, in the morning, I like to do at least an hour or 2 of focused work and then get out there and meet with people. And that's really where I thrive is just talking with people and connecting with people, and then ending my day with my family. So literally getting home, putting the phone away, at like 6, 7 p.m. and just spending time with my wife, doing whatever we're going to do, watch a movie, eat dinner, go for a walk, anything like that, and be present.
What have you found to, what I want to ask, like spend time with the family that it's rejuvenating to do like the next day of sorts? Sometimes I found individuals who are, entrepreneurials or whatnot really love, and this also speaks for myself in the sense of love work, love working out. Those are things that benefit me and enjoy other people, love my family and friends and like want to, be around them. Social-ish person. I'm a low extrovert, so I don't need it, but I like deep conversation, not just like being around people. This idea of like what sort of rejuvenation sort of pieces have you found? Maybe it is kind of like detaching and like, watching a movie sort of thing, or it's like going out and doing something and having a new experience with like those you love, essentially. I've also sometimes found that then it's like another thing. Dare I say it's the seventh thing on the to-do list, right? And so there have been seasons I've personally felt, and I'm not sure if you have the same, where it's just like, man, like doing the business and like doing life, just like one of them I just don't want to do, or I don't want to do both of them because I'm so overwhelmed or something like that. So maybe I also don't believe in balance, but regardless, it's the idea of like what sort of rejuvenation sort of things have you found? What has that growth period been like and that you've experienced?
Yeah. I mean, everything you said, I totally agree with, right? Like I struggle with it daily. Like it's not like I have everything figured out. And so like that part is what I found most beneficial is what you said with different experiences, right? When I get off of work and it's like, man, if we've watched a movie the last night, then I don't really want to watch a movie again, right?
Sure.
With like
Yeah.
the same thing. But but if but if I've had a 12-hour day and I come home, I'm like exhausted, then it's like, man, it's tough for me to want to go out to eat or go for a walk or something like that. I would say the walk is the easiest thing for me to do though. The walk is like, okay, that's a reset. There's no phone. We're actually just out doing something and it calms my mind. And so whether I've been super busy or whether I haven't,
Yeah.
that the walk activity is always great. And then either making a dinner or going out to eat for dinner is always a winner too.
Yeah, I found definitely walking has been the most like malleable where it's like, hey, I really just want to like process something subconsciously. I want to process something consciously. I want to be social. I want to be alone. I want to have that, phone call or podcast or, maybe scripture reading, prayer walk. Like you can think of a number of different things, right? But it's really like flexible. Movie's kind of a movie, unless maybe, you're around people who are talking during the movie, which, sometimes fun depending on the movie. So yeah, definitely agree with that. And was curious also if book writing in any way was, a rejuvenation of sorts. I mean, certainly you mentioned like journaling, right? What has that process been like, for you? I mentioned to you before we started, in the process of writing my book, beyond the co-author book, and this idea of like writing an hour a day has come into mind, especially when I did, Project 50. I should really intertwine that into when I say I do my ideal day. But regardless, it's to say that, what was that process like to, write a book? What was that formation been of like how that idea came? It seems like you just had a lot of knowledge, frustrations, experience, and education that you really just wanted to kind of condense in it. But was that kind of like a work piece to add something on the, calendar, or was it more like a reflection, journaling, separation thing, maybe even like a mixture. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So I've always wanted to write a book. Like, growing up listening to Bigger Pockets, Brandon Turner, like, I've just always been like, man, I would love to write a book one day to help people, compress all the knowledge and really just be like, okay, if you're starting from zero, or if you want to scale, like this is everything you need to know. And so it's basically, I wrote it for me when I was starting out. If I was to restart, this is what I would want to know. And so then to answer your question, as far as like, what was the book writing process like? It was ebbs and flows of financial freedom, right? So I had a lot of time at my hands because things were working well and things were slow. And so I was like, okay, well, now it's time to write the book. And it was really rejuvenating. I really enjoyed it. It took me 3 weeks on a park bench with no chat GPT, but just like literally writing for, between 4 to 8 hour days just on a park bench. And I really enjoyed being out there in nature. I tried doing it inside and it was way better outside. And then it just became, fantastic to do. I even incorporated, and I'm not like a hippie and I don't know if grounding actually works or not, but like when it became all the edits, I would just lay outside on my front lawn, take my shoes and socks off and just like read it and edit it. And so it became a peaceful, regenerating thing, like you said, and I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. What is it? I mean, finished it and in the process of, releasing it and sharing it. What do I want to ask? Oftentimes as we like experience, big things that we've done, right? That could be that, net worth sort of number or like leaving that job or things like that. There's a big rush of just adrenaline excitement. And then you're on the other side. There's also this concept of like I'll have to look up what terminology, but like an Olympian kind of like depression of sorts, like you accomplished it. Now what sort of piece? And so I was curious of like, have you, had that in any, of your like big accomplishing like sort of experiences? If so, what was that like? And if not, maybe why do you think that is?
I think like when I bought a $3.5 million like 26 unit townhome building, like that put me over 100 units in my portfolio, and that was like a big day. Like that was an awesome day, one of the top highlights, right? And then it was like celebrated it that day. Woke up the next morning, was like, now what, right? And
Yeah.
so one of the things that I had to really overcome was, instead of just having an achiever mindset, really find gratitude in the good things, and then just keep, basically stay true to myself, rediscover, am I doing it for the recognition, or am I doing it to honor God with my time, talents, and abilities? Right. And that was the big shift that I had to do. And it's still a struggle every day. Like pride is still a struggle. Like even in this book launch, man, like, it's like, am I doing this book launch for me, or am I doing it for God? Right. And so it's like with all of this, as the recognition and as the name brand comes up, it's like marketing is a slippery slope of like, okay, who are you really serving here? And so that's where I really meant like, this is for the person that wants to restart, or the person that wants to build a portfolio to then
Yeah.
experience whatever they want in life for their own financial purposes. Right. And yeah, if I can help one person do that, then awesome.
I was thinking of like, what do you say or what do you think or what is done of like thinking really like tactically of like, how do you keep your pride in check? But what does that maybe like process? Like, do you do something with it, or is it just an awareness of like, hey, I have some pride right now. I recognize it and just let it go in a way of, emotions.
Yeah. So one of the programs I did this year is called Rejuvenation. So it's a Christian program. A lot of churches will partner with the group that will do it. And it helps people be freed of addictions, whether that's drinking or pornography or selfishness or anything. And so getting around a group of men, for me, that can hold you accountable, that we meet every Monday, right? And
Cool.
it's just like, okay, like joining Bible studies of other people, of other Christians that can get to know me, and surround myself with fruit of people that can call you out, right? If you're not doing it, you got to have people that you respect and trust and have similar mindsets that also have the ability to call you out if you're not doing things right. That has helped me. And my wife consistently humbles me, and it's good. So just having the people.
Yeah.
And then couple that with like having the relationship with God. So like, every morning having quiet time, repenting of any sin, and just like resetting, my heart to like serve him that day.
Sure. No, absolutely. It reminds me of a book I read called The Promise Principle, which talks about how oftentimes we pray or even think like, hey, give me peace, give me strength, like give me like the fruits of the spirit. But in all reality, like those are promises. And so if anything, it's more from a sense of gratitude to say, hey, thank you for giving me peace in this situation, even though I don't know to sell my properties or buy more or, whatever, within this real estate investment market, even though it's always chaos, we just, view it differently. But it's that idea of coming from a sense of gratitude that it's already, ours. And that's really then a fundamental piece of, this entire brand experience of this guide to joy. Like, how do we get to joy? Well, in all reality, it's actually already within us. We just don't have that, perception or that experience or that mindset to really recognize that it is and feel it. I could, tell someone till they're, basically pass out. But again, just like actually being able to experience it sort of piece. So yeah, definitely resonate with that.
That is so good. If anything, this year has been the biggest journey of me understanding that like, it's just like all the things God has already, like you said, equipped me with and given me and spoken it over me. It's me getting out of my own way. So
Mm,
what can I carve out of my life that is not of him?
sure.
Right. And that's, like drinking or resentments that I've harbored towards
Mm,
people
yeah.
that, are deep down in my heart. And like an example of this was when I was working at my W-2 job, I was the top sales guy in the network. So I was very good at
Yeah.
my job, but I had an entitlement. I had like entitlement in my heart. It was like, because I was great, I deserved X. And so like, because I was one of the best company, like you hit your numbers after 2 years, you get a company car. And so I was buying, 20 plus houses a year, plus multifamily, and, being the top in the company and driving the car. And I would work on my phone while I
Yeah.
drove. And so I got 3 texting and speeding complaints, like people called in because I had the company branded car. And eventually the manager took the company car from me. And I was like all of my customers were so happy, highest surveys, highest, I would treat them so well. And so I was like, how can you ever take that away from me? That I don't deserve that. Right. And so I harbored a lot of resentments. Actually, I quit corporate that year. I was like, all right, F this, I'm done. I'm doing my
Sure.
own thing.
Want my car?
Yeah, exactly. And so it was just, and I hated that manager. And he, like, I don't know if he even remembers me. I'm sure he does, but all of that was just resentments that were in my heart that I was harboring and carrying with me for no reason. And so at this point now I can understand a lot more of resentments that are with me. And maybe if you're listening to this, it's like, okay, what triggers you? What are the
Mm,
things that are like, man, like if that happens, I'm going to be pissed or sad, one of the two. And you're probably carrying with you a resentment. And I guess the last thing I'll share with you that I've learned in this process is bitterness is a poison pill that you take hoping
mhm,
the other person dies.
mm.
So it's, yeah, just figuring out what these resentments are, forgiving people that, may need to be forgiven or may not, but you have to let it go.
Yeah.
And then walking in your true self.
Yeah, and finding, learning, understanding, being open to like, who that is. A lot of this brand is like around that idea because, by golly, if we put the same amount of time and effort, energy into building from, 0 to 100 unit portfolio in terms of understanding ourselves, we may realize we, truly only need 3, yet we, desire, like you mentioned, achievement mentality. 100, well, this book's only going to get me to 100. Like I got to get to 1,000. Certainly pounding the pavement and like recognizing the process. It's, actually doing the steps for it and understanding like what it's all for, to your point earlier, because we often can think of greater, bigger things, but maybe not do greater, bigger things. And so really being in tune to, again, live authentic self, live your ideal day, things like that. No, it's great, great perspective and insight with, this kind of guide to joy. What would be maybe like a mantra, perspective, quote, story, fable, like what comes to mind that like you would put in this kind of guide?
So the thing that changed my life was when I read Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And habit number 2 is begin with the end in mind. And so there's an activity in that book that I did when I was 22 years old in the basement of my duplex. And I pictured going to my own funeral. Right.
Mm,
And I would highly, highly recommend this. Like if you're in a car, do it another time or pause the podcast and just literally like if you're going to a funeral, what's it smell like? What's it look like? Who are the people there? And then there's 4 people that talk there. And it's your family member, your coworker, your spiritual leader, and a friend. And what are they going to say in front of everyone about your life? Right. And you can do this. And what would they say now? And then what do you want them to say?
yeah.
And look at that gap. If there is one, hopefully there's not, right? But if there is, then it's like, okay, what actions do you need to change to then create the life that you ultimately want to create? And that ultimately changed my life.
Yeah, I can absolutely echo that. Interestingly enough, that's one of the exercises I created. So I have kind of a template of that because I found the exact same thing where it's like if I desire for people to say like, the world was, for example, like better because he dwelt upon it, like in what way, right? And showed kindness to everyone he met. Okay, well, how does that then work for like me today, right now, in this conversation or the next one, right? Like if I'm not living by that, it's really like a litmus test of like how's the status, the temperature, as opposed to this ego driven aspect of like, oh no, I'm great, like people would love me, 1,000 people would come, like I'd be on the news. And it's like, well, like are you abiding by the things that you truly care about? And I've also found that typically net worth and cash flow isn't put in there when you write your eulogy, but that's just my perspective has been. And then when I was at a mastermind group and we did this as well, so it just gives again this different perspective of what are we truly after, living by that and becoming more of that so that we can be it essentially. So yeah, so glad you shared that. And for everything else, definitely will include a couple links in the show notes to your stuff, and then also any pre-launch or post-launch stuff for your book, which is so exciting. Hope you get to sign your own book, put it in your shelf, and just constantly remind yourself of the great work you've done.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for having me, Paul. And if anybody does want to get it, it's called Your First 100 Units. The Real Estate Investor's Playbook to Scaling a Rental Portfolio. So it's coming out October 17th on my birthday this year.
There you go. October 17th, 2024. Mark it in the calendars. Awesome. Well, thanks, Wyatt, for coming on, sharing your perspectives. Really enjoyed going through it and, learning as well. So
yeah, thanks so much for having me, Paul. Enjoyed it.
If something resonated with you today, share it with a friend. And if you enjoyed today's podcast, leave a 5-star review. It's one of the best ways that I can know what and how I'm doing is being beneficial to you and your life as a listener. Thanks for joining. We'll see you on next episode.